Hello and welcome to Micro Live. Tonight we look at the increasing use of computer-controlled direct mail, which is now so effective in the United States that senators and congressmen have to spend vast sums of money on it to have any chance of being re-elected.
And hot off the drawing board, Micro Live shows exclusive clips from the very latest in computer animation. They were shown recently at the Monte Carlo Television Festival, where they created quite a stir.
Well, all of us get unsolicited mail through our letterbox, but in America, direct mail techniques successfully used in the commercial world are now being used in politics, as Freff reports from Washington.
Less involvement in federal, and yet the schools are in so much financial trouble, and we're seeing cutbacks.
We do have a problem, and I think part of it is we simply, as a nation, have to...
It's 8:30 in the morning on Capitol Hill, and Senator Paul Simon provides breakfast for a group of his constituents lobbying on behalf of handicapped children. But even in the American democracy, only a small fraction of voters can ever come face-to-face like this to influence their politicians. Paul Simon is the Democratic senator for Illinois, representing 11.5 million people. Unlike a British MP, who's lucky to have a single researcher, he has a staff of 50 to help him with day-to-day business. His suite of offices has a network of computer terminals linked to databases of all kinds, providing news, statistics, and the very latest state of any American law.
We get about 1,000 letters a day on every kind of a subject. And people ask me to vote against this or for that. And because of computers, we can go back then 3 weeks from now or 6 weeks from now and say, this is what happened on this bill. It passed, I voted this way. You can give them information that, frankly, without computers, to do it manually, you just couldn't do.
Every letter that comes in is scanned by a skilled researcher. The chances are that it can be answered using one of many hundreds of standard letters and paragraphs, which are constantly being updated by political aides. Once the letter is marked, it's passed to the word processor, where the paragraphs are bolted together and topped and tailed with salutations from the great man himself. The finished letters are then sent electronically to central laser printers and envelope stuffing and stamping machines to be posted at the taxpayer's expense. The result, personalized replies created by a slick production line process. And of course, the senator's signature is also put on by the computer.
That's something of the new practice of politics, but there's an old concern that's never far from a politician's mind, which is getting re-elected, which takes money, lots of it. With the exception of presidential races, there's no limit on campaign spending in America. More than one senator has put as much as $12 million into reaching office. That's not the kind of money you find in cookie jars. So to raise it, politicians are turning to a new group of power brokers, consultants with a simple idea. They're taking developments in computerized direct mail advertising and telemarketing schemes, originally designed for private industry, and are using them to reshape the American political landscape.
Direct mail in America is the third largest form of advertising, so it's advertising. We are in a form of a letter explaining the project, the cause, and asking people to send a contribution, to write to their congressmen or senators, make phone calls, and get involved in the political process and help pay for the advertising at the same time. In 1983, we mailed 83.5 million letters. In 1984, we mailed about 102 million letters. So over the years, we've raised a fair amount of money to support causes for lower taxes, strong national defense, from literally millions and millions of people.
But now it's not just begging letters which come into your home.
Yes, sir. My name is Bob Weir.
Howdy. I'm calling. First of all, I want to thank you for your past support. It really is important to the work that we do. And I do hope you're aware that it's only 4 months between now and the general election. And it's absolutely imperative that we do take back
This group is using cut-price, long-distance leased telephone lines to call ordinary Americans in their homes to ask them to pledge money. They could be working for any organization, but today it's for a group of Democratic senators up for re-election.
It's called our $1 Million Media Fund. And the object for us is quite simply to raise $1 million over the course of the next 30 days.
Their script allows for almost any kind of response, favorable or unfavorable. They can be very persuasive and very persistent. And the extraordinary thing is that most Americans don't hang up. They're flattered.
We're hoping, sir, that we could count on you tonight to make a $1,000 pledge to the Democratic campaign.
So we're calling all of our friends like yourself to see if it is possible for you to help us out with a $1,000 contribution. Right, $1,000. I know it's an awful lot of money, but it's...
Well, I realize that's a lot of money, sir, and most people can't contribute at that level. The reason we ask, quite simply, I hope you'll understand, is that we don't get gifts like that unless we do ask for them.
The Republicans are very well funded. They have a lot of very wealthy supporters. But this year we're determined that their money will...
The people they're ringing aren't being called up at random. They've been carefully selected as the people in a particular area most likely to donate and most likely to be sympathetic to the cause, given a bit of persuasion.
So how do they find you? Well, the answer is a little sharp thinking and a lot of computer time. Just living, you leave a trail. You join organizations, you subscribe to magazines, you pay your bills. And at the other end of every one of those actions, there's someone keeping a list. This great heavy book is a directory of people advertising computerized mailing lists like this for rent. You can find almost anything in here. For example, just flipping through at random, we see mathematical specialists, upper management administrators by sex and income. That would be used for certain things. The Greater Chicagoland area Catholics. And over here, your gateway to the affluent black market. Now, this is described as black families, professionals and business executives, including members and leaders of recognized black organizations. Now, clearly, this would be valuable to a political candidate. There are 115,000 names on the list, and all those people are available to you for only $65 per thousand. In the American private sector, there are no restrictions on how lists like these can be used. And these are just the companies that advertise. There are others with lists more sensitive, more carefully targeted, that are only available if you've got the right connections.
That listing we found in the book for affluent blacks, how would a politician go about using that?
Well, for example, if you were a Republican and you wanted to bring those people into your organization, you would probably concentrate in rural areas in the South where affluent blacks would tend to be more Republican-oriented. Pretty well forget it in the big cities where they tend to be assimilated into the power structure that currently exists.
So what you do is you'd actually take a section of the list and compare it to some other list, perhaps?
The amazing thing about the computer technology is your ability to cross-reference lists, so that if you want to mail to a black person who is against gun control and in favor of abortion, you can find a list of those people, any combination of factors that you want.
We're hoping you might even pledge $250 to help us out in this campaign to regain control of the Senate for the Democrats.
So the people being rung today are known to be favorable to the Democratic cause. They're known to have donated to causes before, and their phone numbers will have been found from other publicly accessible computerized lists.
That would be terrific.
$20 would be fine.
Oh, it is very expensive. If you get back $3 for every $2 that you spend, it is regarded as very successful.
$250 is a lot of money. We do need your help with this $1 million media fund, sir. Would it perhaps even a gift of $100 be possible at this time? Oh, $100. That's wonderful, sir. We really appreciate your support.
Persistence pays off, but techniques like this are very controversial. Many think they're dangerous. But fundraisers like Richard Viguerie claim they widen democracy.
Now we have a situation where literally millions of people, unprecedented in world history, millions of people are giving $5, $10, $20 to their favorite candidate, their political cause, their political party, and you have, in a sense, opened up that back room, smoke-filled room, and put a lot of sunlight in it and let millions of people participate.
Congressional campaign spending is out of control. In the last campaign in 1984, on the average, winners spent $3 million. And on the average. And some spent $16 million or $12 million or $10 million. So raising money to run for office is becoming almost a full-time job, and it's diverting the attention of office holders away from their responsibilities. And it's making the ability to raise substantial amounts of money almost a prerequisite of office.
The more money is raised, the more it's being spent on sophisticated ways of influencing voters. In this technique, they find out your views and get them on computer.
May I please speak with John Peace? Mr. Peace, my name is Allison, and I'm calling for Senator Fritz Hollings. It would help Fritz do a better job if I could take just a minute to ask you your opinion on some issues facing South Carolina and the country. Would that be okay? Which two of the following problems should Senator Hollings try the hardest to solve? Federal budget deficit, tax reform, national defense.
A phone call like this enables the politicians and the special interest groups to know what concerns you. Then they can send you very closely targeted mail on quite specific issues.
What we're trying to do is discern information that we can mail voters and give them a candidate's particular views so that it's much better targeted. I mean, if you care about the environment, why should I be talking to you about the deficit? Or vice versa. I mean, what I want to do is speak specifically to your concerns rather than generalize it. I mean, in American politics, TV tends to homogenize the messages. And what we're trying to do is become more specific, and the use of connecting a telephone to a computer to direct mail to the telephone, again, allows me to communicate in a two-way dialogue with a voter.
This is the kind of thing that might land on your front doormat. It's part of a gun control campaign and designed to get you to write to your congressman. A blunt mock-up of an advertisement exposes the activities of one congressman accused of being in the pay of the handgun lobby. The idea is that if enough people are persuaded to send this to him, he might change his mind.
To be effective in direct mail, you have to scream at people. I find inevitably the direct mail pieces we use, I have to tone them down. And the direct mail people are always unhappy when I tone them down because they say they're going to be less successful. Direct mail appeals tend to be extreme.
The use of direct mail enables a candidate to say different things to different people, depending on which list you're renting.
Let me put that in plain English. It gives them a chance to lie a little better.
It gives a chance to talk about one part of their record, one part of their policy to one group, and another part to another, and those two may be very much in conflict. Unlike television, in which you generally, that's a mass means of communication, you have to say the same thing to everybody.
Finally, there's the danger of the abuse or misuse of information stored on all those computer lists.
The laws are going to have to adjust to protect privacy for people, to make sure that government and people in the private sector don't invade our lives unnecessarily.
We might do well to heed that advice because computer-targeted direct mail is now increasingly used in this country. In fact, this letter from Norman Tebbit may have dropped on your doormat this very morning. You see, the most sophisticated user of the technique, the Conservative Party, are currently sending out no fewer than 1.6 million letters like this per month. By June, they aim to have sent out 11.5 million.
The Conservatives have devised their own lists of people who might give them campaign contributions or who might vote for them. They compile these lists by combining the 1981 census with other publicly available computer information lists. Most controversially, they've been using the British Telecom Register of Shareholders.
Well, British Telecom isn't very keen on this, as their shareholders have been complaining that BT has obviously sold the register to anyone who wants it. Well, actually, BT hasn't. The register is publicly available. But BT has now joined with other leading companies to demand a change in the law, and this would limit the uses which a register of shareholders could be put to by outsiders.
The SDP also uses direct mail, but can't afford the kind of research which the Conservatives can. As far as we can discover, the Labour Party doesn't use direct mail at all.
Of course, during a general election, there is, in any case, a legal limit of about £5,000 per constituency, which a party can use to promote a candidate. But there is, however, no limit to the amount of money which a party can use to promote itself for the rest of the time. Now, we've seen how very powerful these techniques have proved to be in the United States. So if the Tories are now using direct mail to that extent, maybe all political parties will soon be forced down that same road. Earlier this month, MicroLive visited the Imagina Conference, and it's an international showcase for the best in computer graphics. As usual, there were some stunning examples of animation, and there seems to be evidence of a new approach to realism. But first, a bit of background.
Tyndale cheese may look like a traditional cheddar, and it certainly tastes like a traditional cheddar. But there's one small difference. Tyndale's made with half the fat, so it's fit for people with a regard for healthy living.
Well, that was a rather nice piece of traditional animation by one of Britain's top animators, Oscar Grillo. It was produced in the classic way. First, the animator decides on the characters and outlines a story. This is the storyboard for that commercial. Well, there are certain key stages. For example, how far will the mouse move over here? Where does he jump to exit down the little hole, and so on. And these will be drawn first by the animator. Then other artists will in between these key frames by drawing in the missing movement. The final effect looks a little bit like this. Well, these line drawings are then transferred to film or video, frame by frame, and the animator can judge the resulting effect. Any problems, and it's back to the drawing board. That's what's called a line test, and if it's OK, each drawing is copied onto an acetate, rather like this, and then it's painted, hand-painted in the final colours. There could be up to 700 or so for about a 30-second animation.
Tyndale's made with half the fat, so it's fit for people with a regard for healthy living.
But meanwhile, over in the computer camp, mathematicians were exploring the potential of computer technology. Couldn't it be used to create solid-looking three-dimensional images that could be drawn and viewed from any angle? Here's a very simple example of what I'm talking about. This is what's known as a wireframe drawing. It's of a house, and as you can see, the program is recalculating its position and redrawing it at some speed. Now, the same thing in colour actually takes quite a while to execute. So, to get some feeling of fluid movement, we've shot each frame separately and then run the film at normal speed, and this is the result. And don't forget, no one's drawn any of this. The computer does it all from the computer model by viewing it and reproducing it at different angles.
But in the early 80s, computer scientists at the New York Institute of Technology were experimenting with computerizing the in-betweening in traditional two-dimensional animation.
So actually what you're doing is telling each line where to go and how to get there in order to make that interpolation very smooth and very clear for you.
Now, in this case, you only did 2 drawings yourself, right?
That's all. The first keyframe right here and the last keyframe right here. And the rest of them are all computer generated.
And the in-betweening system isn't limited to simple images. This piece, called Saw Loser, has over 100 lines and about 5 computer-generated pictures for each one drawn by hand.
Meanwhile, three-dimensional work was improving dramatically and being used more and more on TV and in films to give this now familiar flying, swooping effect. Now, this is from the film Explorers, which is currently on release in the UK.
Wow. Is this what your first dream was like? Wolfgang, this is a private dream. Not anymore. You too? I thought you never dreamed. Yeah, so did I. Wait a minute. Don't you see we're all here? There must be a reason for this. There's always a reason when you dream. What are these, drive-ins?
That sort of modelling has been mixed very effectively with aerial photography. This next piece shows a proposed stadium to be built in France.
Well, that was a first prize winner from the Imagina Forum in the scientific category. And with me to have a look at some of the other entries is Martin Lambinet, designer of some of the best-known animations on British television. Martin, what did you think to that animation there?
I think it's terrific, actually, because it's a sensible use of computers. If you ever want to, say to a client, this is what we're going to build, the best thing is to build it, and that's what they've done. They built it on a computer, and in particular, here they've put it in the actual place it's going to go, in the right environment. And that's particularly difficult, actually, mixing live action with computer animation.
Well, of course, computers are quite good at dealing with geometric shapes, aren't they?
Yes, they're very, that's their best thing, really, and so that's why architecture is often used with computers.
But you used computer animation for the Channel 4 logo, and you also used it for this one. It's a lovely piece of work.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar.
Great. Tell me how you did it.
Well, of course, it was a piece of computer animation, but unlike other jobs we had tackled, this had to be funny. Now, up to that point, nobody had made a funny computer graphic sequence. And so we turned to traditional animation. And we got the whole job animated by hand, and then made into a line test, just like the sort of thing you see in Oscar's work. And then we took that along to the computer house and said, copy that. And the result of that was we got much more fluid movement, we got acting out of it, and we got character out of it. That's why it's funny.
Would you like to take us through developing an advert, for example, using computer animation techniques?
Yeah, certainly. Well, you start with the script, and you start with something like this, the storyboard. This one was for a Honeywell commercial that we did. And they asked us to produce them a commercial that looked as if it had been made by computers. So, first thing we had to do is characters. And we had 3 cracks at it. This was the first crack. We needed a boss character in it and a secretary, but this is the boss character. They regarded this as being far too pretty, far too designed. So we went away. This was too ugly. This they regarded as being in the right area. So we determined our characters. That's the first thing we do. Now, it'd be very nice to be able to just point a camera at all this and put it into the computer that way, but no, life isn't like that, I'm afraid. You have to do working drawings. And there were 15 of these working drawings. This is the character with all its elevations.
That's the businessman with his amazing suit.
That's right, yes, which sadly never got there in the end. It was never used. But all these coordinates are then fed into the computer by the computer operator, our computer animator. So, once that's in, we then have to get things to act. And again, we went back to traditional animation, or traditional animator, and got him to work with a computer animator. And together, they solved all the problems. So the result of it was that you got a piece of acting, you got a performance, not just a series of wooden figures walking
Well, we
around.
actually have a copy of that advert, so perhaps we could have a look at that and see what the end product really looked like.
If you had a Honeywell automated office, it would eat up paperwork and increase secretarial efficiency. It sends messages faster than Concorde and talks to other computers anywhere. Your business could be much more productive with office automation when it's designed well, built well, Honeywell.
Very nice. Well, you're a commercial designer, obviously used to working in limitations of budget and how much money you can spend, but at Imagina, a lot of the things were actually done as research projects. And we've got one here which is really rather nice. It's a piece of material, and it's to follow it as it's lifted up by the corners and shaken, and as it's hung over various objects. It's actually mathematically working out the lines of each of the threads and then contouring between the two of them. It's very realistic. What do you think to it?
I think it's a wonderful piece of research, and it's an amazingly clever piece of work. In fact, I could have used that very thing 2 months ago, I must say, on a commercial for a soap powder that we were involved in. But we had to, in the end, use a model because there was no way of doing it. But I'm very interested to see that.
Yes, it's very nice. Look at it shaking. Very clever piece of work there. Well, we've got another one here. It's really quite interesting because it's from the opening title sequence of Labyrinth, which is a film just been released in London. And it's done by Bill Croy, who's an ex-Disney animator. And what they did was did the complete rules for one complete wing flap on this owl, and they worked it out on a wireframe model. And then they went into great detail, almost every feather on the owl, to produce a very detailed effect of it flying. And they could view it from almost any angle and make it fly in any position that they want it to. And the sequence coming is very, very detailed. Very nice piece of work. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it is an amazingly clever piece of work, there's no doubt about it. But I find myself asking the question, why is it there? I mean, as a director, that's my job. Why? And I have to answer it as saying, well, why on earth didn't we shoot a real owl? I mean, what's it doing that's special? If you
I
really
wonder
want
if they can
something
actually make it land like the owl at the start of Micro Life,
Yes.
for example.
Well, be a bit more relevant.
Well, perhaps the most obvious living creature is the human being, and people have been trying to imitate that. And this is a rather nice piece of computer graphics where the movements are very realistic.
Yes, this is a really difficult problem. Computer animators for a long time have been trying to solve this. This is to be viewed purely as a piece of research. And it's about the weight being distributed on the body and making it look heavy and solid. Heaven knows what it's pulling.
No, it's strange that.
Yeah.
Look at that jump, very realistic.
But again, we have a job that we need to do, which is going to need that kind of research.
Well, John Lasseter was a young designer, a young graphics designer at Disney, and he was very successful at Imagina, in fact. This is one that's quite nice. It actually shows a bee, and he brought, this was done in 1984, as a matter of fact, but it brought into some of the techniques he'd used in Disney, where he blurs the actual image on a computer to make it look as if it's moving extremely fast.
Well, here's a technique that's used sensibly. I mean, you need those wings to flap, and that's the way to do it. It's a charming piece of work.
Well, that won the overall third prize, and it's full of Walt Disney techniques. But John Lasseter also won the first prize with an amazing piece of film, and we actually have some of his working drawings, actually, as they were run live on the computer itself. And you can see this is the original character, this angle-poised lamp.
Yes, right. We see he's sort of developing the character. Here we have just the angle-poised lamp.
Those are the movements he can make at that point.
That's right. But now we start to see it become a character. That's that's really
it
terrific.
Feels heavy and it feels very weighted, doesn't it? Now he's got to put a story and develop those characters, and we actually have a clip from the final winning entry. It really is a superb piece of graphics. A lot of humanity in that. It's difficult to believe it was generated entirely by computers.
Yes, absolutely, but that's great. That's a good point about it. I mean, who cares what it's generated by? It's an absolutely wonderful film. Gets my prize too.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Yeah. Well, that's all for this week. Next week, we take a long look at computers and their ever-increasing use in medicine.
But until then, have one last look at a prize-winning animation produced for the Aluminium Can Information Association by Robert Abel and Associates in Los Angeles. Good night.